Hello students. So in this video we are going to uh, understand the basic stretch reflex, or what we call the somatic reflex. And to understand this, we have to I will be illustrating this picture as an example. So the stretch reflex or the somatic reflex is a monosynaptic reflex, and as you can see in this diagram, where we are trying to uh, elicit the knee jerk, or we are trying to tap the patellar tendon here with the reflex hammer, and as a result what will happen, there will be the extension of the knee, that is the quadricep muscle is going to get stretched, and because of the stretch there will be contraction. So how the stretch reflex works? Here in the muscle you can see this is the stretch receptor, and the which is known as the which is known as the muscle spindle, which is a sensory receptor that detects any kind of stretching in a muscle. So when the reflex hammer is tapped to the patellar tendon, it creates a stretching in the muscle that will stimulate the muscle, which will create a nerve impulse, and if the stretch is strong enough, then the grid channels will open, depolarization will take place, and if it reaches the threshold, the action potential will generate, and then ultimately the impulse will travel along this sensory nerve. So when this action potential is generated, this impulse is taken by the sensory nerve. It enters the dorsal root ganglion, then the dorsal root of the spinal nerve into the spinal cord, where the dorsal gray matter is there, and it synapses with a motor neuron here, which will synapse is a motor neuron in this area, and this motor neuron will take the impulse in continuity to the along the ventral horn of the gray matter, and it will come out of the ventral root, out of the mixed spinal nerve, and then it will come out to the carrying back the motor impulse to the same muscle, and which will result in contraction of the muscle. So this contraction is generated by this stretch reflex or the muscle spindle in order to protect the muscle from overstretching, and the muscle contracts to prevent the overstretching, and the contraction will result in the contraction of the muscle. Ultimately the action will be knee extension. So now in this process there is an extra branch here, you can see, which is called the reciprocal reciprocal inhibition, or the reciprocal innervation. So this will branch with a synapse with an interneuron, which is an inhibitory in nature, and that is why after it synapses with the interneuron, the inhibitory, it will synapse with the inhibitory motor neuron, and from here you can see these, there is the dotted red line coming to the other group of the muscle, that is the antagonistic group, where the dotted means it synapses and it inhibits the action. So when there will be inhibitory motor neuron, that will, it inhibits the fire and firing of impulse, and ultimately this antagonistic group of muscles is going to relax, so that This muscle group can perform the action more smoothly and more easily. So this is together what we call the simple reflex called the stretch reflex, which almost all the reflexes has this kind of excitatory and inhibitory motor neurons, which act together in a coordinated manner so that the agonist and the antagonist work harmoniously. When the agonist muscle group is contracting to prevent the stretch, the antagonistic group must relax so that the movement is smooth and without any restriction. So this thing is called as the stretch reflex, where we use this in all the muscle groups. Also, if we compare this same thing in the upper limb, in the biceps brachii, then this inhibitory impulse will be inhibiting the triceps, which is the antagonistic group, and the biceps will elicit the function of the elbow flexion. So once again I quickly recap. This is the muscle spindle. So inside the spindle, again we have certain types of nuclear chain and nuclear bag fibers, the extrafusal and the intrafusal fibers. The extrafusal fibers are along the muscle origin and insertion, that, and the intrafusal fibers are in the connective tissue part of the muscle, and these kind of fibers, they sense the tension and the lengthening of the muscle, the tension build up and how much the muscle is lengthened. In accordingly they act and they protect the muscle from overstretching. So this muscle spindle, which is composed of the extrafusal and intrafusal fibers, intrafusal again containing the nuclear bag and nuclear chain. The nuclear bag is in the middle like a bag shape, and the nuclear chain is in a beaded chain manner. Also you have the flower shape embedded neurons, flower spray embedded neurons. So all this together, this muscle spindle, when we try to tap the patellar tendon, immediately there will be a stretching in the muscle. That stretching is sensed by this muscle spindle. Immediately uh, there will be contraction in the muscle to prevent overstretching and injury of the muscle. So this contraction, how it happens, when there will be this contraction happening, when the impulses are strong, it will again work for the ion gets to open and depolarization, and the depolarization happens. After depolarization, the once it reaches the threshold, the action potential is generated, and this action potential will now travel as an impulse form along the nerve, enter the uh, dorsal root ganglion, then the dorsal spinal root to the gray matter, dorsal horn of the gray matter, and it will synapse here with the motor neuron. So the characteristic feature of this reflex is that it is monosynaptic, that is it synapses only with one motor neuron. Then it has one synapse reflex control. It is then other characteristic is that it is ipsilateral, meaning it is on the same side of the spinal cord, and also that ipsilateral, that is the motor impulse lives on the same side, and it is not intersegmental. That means the motor neuron is also in the same segment of the spinal cord as of the sensory. So these are the characteristics. The monosynaptic, it is ipsilateral, and it is not intersegmental. So ultimately it will leave through the motor neuron, come back to the same muscle, and it will generate the contraction. So here, first when you tap, the muscle stretch is felt here. This muscle stretch will generate impulse. This impulse will be carried to the spinal cord, to the brain, to the spinal cord. So it's called stretch reflex because it is a reflex. So again, this will synapse with the motor neuron. It will come back to the same muscle. Contraction will take place to prevent the overstretching, and during these phenomena, another extra branch is here, and it will synapse with the interneuron, inhibitory neuron, and the inhibitory motor neuron will inhibit the firing of the motors, which will relax the opposite group, the antagonistic muscle group, which will relax, and the uh, movement will elicit in a smooth and unrestricted way. So this is about the stretch reflex. So I hope you understood and got an idea. And any doubt regarding this, please share your doubts. Thank you for watching this video.